Dum, 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 dum. Okay. Kevin, happy birthday. What's your favorite chocolate bar? Oh, I see we got to take you to Dollarama, eh? You're on the spot, eh? It's so... Cadbury's caramel, like the eggs? Okay. Yeah. Oh, caramel. Okay, yes. Okay, good to know. Happy birthday. No, I was remembering they had the golden keys in there. Anyways, it was a long time ago. It was, I know, but they had a golden key in there, and I just always pictured, was it like paper? Was there an actual golden key in there? Did it weigh more? Could you possibly bring a scale to the store and be like, nope, Anyways. You're all warmed up? Get your giggles out? Okay, so I was at the grocery store, and they have Times Journal magazine. I wasn't really a magazine, it was like some kind of book, and it just talked about women of the Bible. And I figured that'd be a good series. But I'm not totally convinced that's what I'm going to be doing all summer long, but I was reading through, and I hit upon Rebecca, and I'm like, what can I learn from Rebecca? And then, of course, God does things in my life, and that's the way it works for me. It's really cool. I talk to other pastors, and they're like, Luigi, I read the newspaper every single day, every morning, and I collect all these articles, and then God just speaks to me, and I bring out these articles. I'm like, that's awesome. I'm like, I like to have my sermon picked by Monday, and then as I walk around, something always happens that inspires my next sermon. And so between Rebecca and something else that happened that we'll get into in a moment, that's what we're going into today. And so as I was reading the story of Rebecca, we'll get into it in a moment, but some lessons that I've learned is that good character is not something that happens like once in a while. It's something that should be a part of our lives, right? And if it's happening all the time, then it becomes a discipline. It just becomes part of who we are. It becomes like when we start to come across decisions that we need to make, they're not so difficult anymore, because if it's based upon the discipline of good character, then it's fairly easy to be like, God wants me to go this way, right? And then when we have that discipline, it removes impulsivity. I say that because I have 3 kids that I'm just like, candy, right? Or something happens and they get upset and they have a burst of something, and it's like, oh, you're acting on impulse. Something happened in your heart, and then boom, you reacted without thinking about it, you just let that emotion control you. And so I try to teach my children, if you have discipline, if you practice good character, then your initial reaction won't be, it'll be like forgiveness. Right? But it takes practice, it takes discipline, it takes, effort on our part to do that. But when you do that, it creates opportunities. Or when the opportunities arise in life, when things begin to happen, your reaction to them are so quick on what you've been disciplined, because you've been practicing it forever and ever and ever, right? And so it's like your impulsivity instead becomes like, the opportunity arises. It's like, yes, I know what to do here. And I feel like that's the story of Rebecca. And again, we'll get into that in a moment. Okay? The cool thing that I read about and was researching as I was studying about Rebecca is she's like the female version of Abraham. She left home, she left everything behind, made a choice to follow what God had in store for her, and she left. She left everything behind to go and do what she was supposed to do. That when she looked at her family and the direction that they should go, it was always in a way that honored God. And we'll get more into that too. Okay? So talking about like that good character and stuff, 1 Corinthians chapter 12, verse 29 says this: Are we all apostles? Are we all prophets? Are we all teachers? Do we all have the power to do miracles? Do we all have the gift of healing? Do we all have the ability to speak in unknown languages? Do we all have the ability to interpret unknown languages? Of course not. So you should earnestly desire the most helpful gifts. Okay? I feel like the desire aspect of that is like just very important. That you're craving, you're striving for, that you're creating hunger inside of you for, right? Because, and I've said this before, God had desire, he spoke it out loud, it happened. He wanted to create, he had willpower, something inside, he spoke it out, and boom, it happened, right? When you think of faith, it's a belief that's in the depths of who you are that changes absolutely everything, but it starts from what you believe in your heart, from your will, from who you are. So that desire is incredibly important. Like I said this morning about running, right? Running and chasing after God, as we sang. That desire of chasing after, of striving towards, in the same way, like I said, good character. When you strive towards the good things of God and you fight for it and you crave it and you want it, it begins to become a part of who you are. And it is so absolutely important. I like how it says, so you should earnestly desire the most helpful gifts. Okay? I don't think that means like you have, list them all out and be like, which one's the most helpful here? This one. I want this one. I think it's more situational, right? As you go through different things in life, as different things happen, because you're always desiring the things of God, right? Always desiring to work in however He needs you to work, right? Those are gifts from God. And there's people that have one or two of those gifts, maybe more, God bless them, and the responsibility that they have. I'd be very happy with just one. Anyways. But that doesn't mean you can't operate in other ones when the time arises. If there needs to be miraculous healing, you desire, since you're always desiring, right? You're crying out to God, God, I need your miraculous hand. Would you work through me in this moment? Will you do what you need to do? So I feel like you should earnestly desire the most helpful gifts is asking God, as you serve God, what is needed right here? What is needed right now? Right? And as you strive towards, it begins to be more a part of who you are. So my story today, Micah, you're up here. You thought you weren't going to get to, anyways. I told Micah my sermon's about him today, and he's like, oh, great. And then he was like, hold on, I'm going to miss it. I'm going to be downstairs, but he's right there, so it's great. So a couple weeks ago, Micah comes home, and I guess before he left for school or wherever he was going, we had asked him to, so his chore is to put away the dishes from the dishwasher and fill it back up, okay? So he had woken up in the morning and was like, it's full. Okay, so puts everything away, and it's like, great, I'm done my chore for the day, right? We have our nice little list posted on the fridge, and it's like, great, I've done what I was asked to do today. Okay, so I've accomplished it, it's over, I don't need to worry about this anymore. I'm just saying all that because try and picture his heart in that moment. It's like, this is my chore, I've completed my obligation, okay? And so then he comes home from school, and it's like, hey Micah, dishwasher's full. What? Again? But I did it this morning. Walks over there, starts to put everything away, right? And then, of course, we eat dinner, and more dishes are made. And so it's like, Micah, can you, what? A third time? But I've already done it twice. I filled my obligation the first time I did it. I was nice enough to do it the second time you asked me. But now, a third time? Oh man, there was steam coming out of his ears, and he walked away. He went to his room, and I'm like, well, what happens now? What do we do with all the dishes, right? And I'm just thinking to myself, I'm like, but we eat more than one meal a day. Someone's got to cook those meals, right? Well, if I only did like one load of laundry once in a while, we'd all be really smelly because we'd be wearing dirty clothes, right? Laundry, you need to be on top of that. There's things that just you need to do all the time. And so I began to try and picture what it was like from his perspective. It was great that he walked away. He's like his dad. When his dad gets overwhelmed and frustrated, he walks away, thinks about things, and comes back. So he walked away, which gave me time to think about it. And it's like, how does he view this? How does he look at this? How did everything unfold? And so I can see that we have a chore list. And so since it's there, it's like, this is my obligation. This is my job. But once I've completed my job, it's done, right? And so I can just picture relief, you know? You have some hard work, you finished it all, and it's like, I can go out and play now. I can go out and do something else. I can, right? It's completed. And then all of a sudden being like, oh, no, you need to do that again. What? But I was going to go out and play, right? So I can picture what's going on in his heart. And so it's interesting because I picture that number 3, and it's like 3 times, and it just reminded me of the story of Peter. okay? Because Peter boasts in Matthew chapter 18, right? It's the parable of the unforgiving debtor. But at the beginning, verse 21, or beginning, midway through, verse 21, Matthew 18 says, "Then Peter came to him and asked, 'Lord, how often should I forgive someone who sins against me?'" And he's being boastful here when he says, 7 times, right? And Jesus replies, "No, not 7 times, but 70 times 7. So just to give you some cultural reference, back then when someone did something horrible against you, stole your stuff, you caught them, I don't know, did really awful things to you, it was common practice, if you will, culturally common practice to forgive someone 3 times. Right? If you had to forgive them a 4th time, it was just like, well, then you were never really contrite to begin with. If you did it again, jeepers, where was your heart that first time? But after the 3rd time, that's it. I have forgiven you for this, and you did it again, and I forgave you, and you did it again. Now, I doubt you're actually asking for forgiveness. You're just looking to get away with something, right? And so it would just put into question everything that like who you are, what you've been asking for. And so it was common practice to forgive 3 times, okay? To be like, it's okay, we'll let this, 3 times. That was it, okay? Peter not only doubles it, goes a little bit more, and he says, 7 times? And he's kind of boasting here. He's like, come on, I forgive people 7 times. That's way more than what is required, than the cultural norm. Look how awesome I'm doing, right? And so the thing about the number 7 it's the number representing perfection. Okay, so Peter's like, there it is. I have completed my obligation to the extreme, to perfection, to like, this is it. Okay, and then Jesus does something awesome. He responds to the philosophy of the situation. And I'll get into that in a moment, just because there's like the philosophy of what I needed to do with Micah. Now, additionally, on the note of 7, just because it pops up in the Bible now and again, Genesis 4, when Cain gets into trouble for having killed his brother, it's mentioned in there. So Genesis 4:13, Cain replied to the Lord, "My punishment is too great for me to bear. You've banished me from the land, from your presence. You've made me a homeless wanderer. Anyone who finds me will kill me." And the Lord replied, "No, for I will give 7-fold punishment to anyone who kills you." Okay? And then as you read on, Cain has kids who have kids who have kids, and down his line there's a gentleman named Lamech, and he gets married, and he's a bit of a troublemaker, and he commits murder also. I guess it was in his blood. He commits murder, and then when he goes home and talks to his wife about it, he's like, yeah, there was going to be 7 times the penalty for anyone who killed Cain. Yeah, well, there'll be 77 times for anyone who comes anywhere against me, right? And again, it's that number 7. So it's like, it will perfectly go against them. It'll go as horribly as possible, okay? And then we know throughout the Bible that when you see repetition, that's instead of saying, the sun is very, 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 very bright today, right? When they repeated things in the Bible, that's how they brought importance to something, right? So if you think of even like the number of 6 in the Bible, when it says like 616, 6, and we know that is the devil's number, 666. If you can look at this the same way, 70 and 7 coming together, it's not about the number, right? It's about the philosophy behind that, okay? So back to dealing with my son. It's great, you guys get a little window in my life. He's like, but it was great because we get to have a conversation about the philosophy about doing the chores. So it was like, dear Micah, I'm not, like I know I'm your dad, but that doesn't make me like your master. You're not my slave. I don't give you chores to slave so that I don't have to do them and it makes my life easier. Like, I'm not trying to burden you, okay? If anything, I'm trying to give you an opportunity to honor. I'm like, Mom has been hurt. She hasn't been able to do all the things that she normally does. I'm like, that means the rest of the family should step up. But what are we going to do? Say, no, I did what I'm supposed to do. I'm not doing anything. Who's going to eat? Are you going to eat off of dirty dishes? I'm like, the reason why we give you chores is not a job. It's because now you're becoming old enough that since you're like such a part of this family, you're going to begin to share in the responsibilities of this family. We are a unit. We have to do this together. We're all in this together. We do it because it's an opportunity to show each other how much we love each other. We're all in this together. We all live life together. We all strive to accomplish together. And since we're in this together, then your part is simply this. But it's not a chore. It's an opportunity to show your love. It's an opportunity to show your care. It's a responsibility that comes to the whole family that you're like, I'll step up and I'll help to carry this. And on that note, if ever you're having a tough day, if ever you're feeling overwhelmed, then ask your family for help. I could do the dishes today. It's not that big of a deal. I'll take care of it for you. Go get your rest. Go get your sleep. And I think something just like, you can see his countenance. Something clicked. Everything changed after that because now I can ask him 100 times, hey. And it's not so much, oh. It's like, all right, Dad. And he goes to do it. And he does it. And it's like, this is an opportunity to honor, to be a part of my family, to, help us do what we need to do as a family. And the thing is that when you take that philosophy and you chase after it, right? You make it a part of who you are, right? If all his life it was just like obligation, reward, obligation, he would become so ingrained in that way, he'd have troubles doing other things in life. But when you change the philosophy behind it, it's like, no, we do this out of love. We do this because we're all in this together. We're all going to struggle through this together. We're all going to, and it's a beautiful thing. It's an opportunity to, right? Then when he looks at life that way, it becomes a discipline. It becomes like, if everything you do in life at that point on as he grows is like, this is an opportunity to honor my family. This is another chore that I wasn't asked to do, but you know what? It's a responsibility that needs to be done in this family. I'll take care of it this week. Whoa, that'd be pretty cool, right? Because then in his heart, he's understood something. And it becomes part of who he is. So later on in life, when he gets married, when he has kids of his own, when he goes to school, off to college, when he strives to take care of responsibility, to take care of other people, to love other people. It becomes part of who he is. And this is what is so important. It's wonderful when we read Galatians 5:22, but the Holy Spirit produces this kind of fruit in our lives: love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. And those attributes are not like one-offs. It's not a opportunity to be gentle. Yeah, that's a spirit working in me, right? It is something that should become a part of who we are, the everyday of our lives. Something that when it says but the Holy Spirit produces this kind of fruit in our lives, it's not talking just about a moment. It's talking about since we're chasing after God with all of who we are, since we're trying to look more like him, since we're loving him and we're trying to look a little bit more like him, right? That this stuff begins to be produced in us on a regular basis. To a point where I would argue that it becomes discipline. It becomes such a part of who you are that you work in it constantly. So when something rough comes towards you, you respond with gentleness immediately because it is who you are. Because it is what God and the Spirit are working inside of you to grow, to exude from you, to overpour from you, that you are working in those things. It's not just, yay, I was gentle with someone today and I didn't need to be, but there it is. It becomes a discipline. It becomes part of who you are. And I've given this example before, but in Bible college, I had one of my professors, and he had like joy, just out of his life all the time. It didn't matter what happened. It didn't matter when we didn't know what would happen tomorrow and things were hard and things were difficult. He just exuded peace and joy and love. And just being near him was just like, whoa, he's reflecting God. He's just reflecting God, and I'm such at peace when I'm near him because it's just exuding from him. It's such a beautiful thing, but it's not like it's an on and off switch. It should be something that continuously grows and we are constantly producing. Okay? Look at that. Fantastic. Okay, so now let's get into Rebecca. Give you some backstory. Abraham's wife passes away, and he's worried about his son. His son is about 37 years of age, Isaac, and he's like, so don't forget, Abraham left everything behind to go to the land that God promised him, okay? And the land that he's in is full of people that don't love him. And so when your son grows up in that, it's like, well, who's my son going to marry? Don't want to pick any of that. That's around me, right? So he gets 37, which is fairly old to be beginning to getting married at that age, right? So Abraham, he knows, he's like, my time is coming soon as well, right? And my biggest worry is that my son marry one of the Canaanites or the Hittites or one of the cultures that are around us. This can't happen. I can't allow this to happen. He needs to marry someone from our lineage, from who God has already blessed, okay? So he takes his old servant, his most favorite servant, and so it's not biblical, so this is just like what I believe. Just you can believe something different, that's cool, but I believe it's Eliezer. Okay? If you remember when Abraham wasn't having children, he's like, Lord, but I'm not having any kids, so all that I have is going to pass on to my servant Eliezer. Okay? And so I believe that it's him. I think that it's Eliezer here, who was his favorite, who was his. And so when he says, I need you to go back home. Now, I want you guys to take in consideration, this is a 6-week journey by camel. Okay? They didn't have cars or planes. 6-week journey. Very hot outside, long journey to be going on. Okay? And he's like, I need you to swear an oath, okay? Put your hand under my thigh and swear this oath that you're not going to let my son, marry one of these, and you're going to go back and get someone from my bloodline, okay, whom he can marry, okay? And he's like, well, what if I don't find her? And he goes, don't worry. An angel will guide you. He'll lead you to where you need to. You will find her. Don't you worry about that, okay? And so he sets off on his journey. Okay, I think, and again, the biggest worry was that we didn't want Isaac to be marrying off someone he shouldn't be. So Genesis 24, this is where I'm going to be spending most of my time this morning. Verse 3, swear by the Lord, the God of heaven and earth, that you will not allow my son to marry one of these local Canaanite women. Go instead to my homeland, to my relatives, and find a wife there for my son, Isaac. It's a long journey. And I can't help but think of Eliezer as he's taking this journey. So one, he takes many camels with him. He not only is there provisions for 6 weeks, tents that you're going to want to sleep in, everything that you need for this long journey, but it also says that he brings all kinds of gifts, right? For the person who he's going to bring back, he's going to give to the family to bless. And so there's like a whole caravan, if you will. And he's not doing this by himself. Obviously, he has people helping him out along the way. Because, you have all kinds of gifts of gold and stuff, 10 truckloads full, and you're pushing that down the street. Anyone who walks by, is going to be like, one guy? That's a lot of gold. Right? So he's got a whole contingency of people with him. Not just for security, but to help him out. So just picture that. We'll build into why that's so important. Now, along the journey, 6 weeks worth, he's got to be thinking to himself, well, what kind of a woman are we looking for? Okay? And for me, being Eliezer, and I think of, my master would have been so generous if God had not given him a child. He was ready to give everything to me. Right? He's such a generous heart. I believe that when I find her, I want her to be generous. He looked at the attributes of who Abraham was, of what he accomplished, When you think of Abraham and Lot traveling, and then they start kind of fighting over the land a little bit, their flocks are intermingling and eating everything, and Lot starts to kind of complain, and Abraham's like, tell you what, let this be the dividing line. What side do you want? You get to pick. Okay? And I imagine Lot would pick the better side, right? But Abraham didn't care, right? It was just like, let me be generous with you. He had a generous spirit. When God wanted to destroy Sodom and Gomorrah, who was there to say, but Lord, what if there's 50 good people in there? You're going to destroy the good along with the bad? And argues with God, right? And so I believe Eliezer, who's experienced all this, is like, when looking for a wife, for Isaac, she needs to be generous. She needs to be a fighter. She needs to be, willing to do what is right. She needs to, and he's pondering all of these things in his heart, okay? So verse 11, this is Genesis 24. He made the camels kneel beside a well just outside the town. It was evening, and the women were coming out to draw water. "O Lord, God of my master Abraham," he prayed, "please give me success today. Show unfailing love to my master Abraham. See, I am standing here beside this spring, and the young women of town are coming out to draw water. This is my request. I will ask one of them, 'Please give me a drink from your jug.' And if she says, 'Yes, have a drink,' and I will water your camels too. Let her be the one who you have selected as Isaac's wife. This is how I will know that you have shown unfailing love to my master." And so I bolded and underlined these words in verse 15, before he had finished praying. So in his heart, he's praying to God. "God, would you help me out?" And before he's done, before he's completely done his thought, before he's completely done honoring God, he saw a young woman named Rebecca coming out with her water jug on her shoulder. Let me give you some just interesting things about wells, because I was like, why do wells keep popping up in the Bible? They seem to be so darn important all the time, right? And so I was having a conversation with my dad earlier in the week, and he was like, "Luigi, when I was young, it was so hard to get a girlfriend." He's like, "I mean, where would you meet them? Where would you see them?" So I would go to like the nightclub, and I'm not sure that's the best place, but I'd go to the nightclub. The thing is, all the ladies had their moms right next to them. And you had to go and ask and be like, "Would you dance with me?" And they look up to their mom, and you had to get permission from mom first. He goes, "It was like impossible." The parents always had a watchful eye, so everything was monitored and watched over. It was the same thing back then. Okay, you didn't let your daughters out ever, right? So you can imagine as an eligible man who's like, "How do I find a wife?" Well, it was either arranged for you, or you would hang out at the well, right? So, because usually the daughters came out in the evening to gather water for the next period of time that you would need it. Okay, and so this was the opportunity. Now they would all come together, so there's like protection. So there, if there's anyone you didn't like, you have a whole bunch of ladies with you, and just be like, "Get lost." But they would all come together, and so it's just cool because when you think of wells, it just pops up often in the Bible. But this was the opportunity to finally be like, "Oh." Okay, and so he goes to the well. Now I imagine Eliezer's very old at this point in time. Okay, and he goes, and I wonder about, like, when did the miracle happen? Right? Because he says, "Dear God, let her, when I ask like this, respond like this." But it says before he was done praying. Right? And so I can't help but feel like God had prepared everything long in advance for this moment. So I almost believe that the words that were coming out of his mouth, God was guiding him to say. Okay? Because the miracle had already happened. Okay? It wasn't the moment she came out. It wasn't in the prayer. It was like the words that God was giving him to say. Right? Because it was the perfect opportunity. Okay? And so it's pretty crazy because he comes out and says, would you give me some water? Okay? Again, not uncommon. She's got this big stone jug she's carrying on her shoulder to bring, water for her family for the day. And so she takes it down and gives him some water so that he can drink. The crazy part in all of this is the fact that she says, "Let me water your camels too." Again, it's not that like there's one camel. There was a whole caravan. There was a whole group. There were fully capable men there who could have drew their own water and gotten water for the camels like they were supposed to be doing. Okay? It was their responsibility, not hers. Okay? Can you imagine going to the gas station and you got like 6 trucks to fill up, and you ask someone, a lady who walks by, "Hey, excuse me, can you fill up my trucks?" I don't even know you. And I got 10 of them, by the way. Okay? Like, it's the most ridiculous thing ever. Can you guys picture this? Okay? But she offers. He did not ask. She offers. "Let me take care of your animals too." You see, in her heart, in that moment, it was something that she had practiced all her life. Generosity. It had become a discipline of who she was. You guys see the whole opportunity thing here? God had begun to prepare in her kindness and generosity and gentleness so that it became who she was. So that it wasn't a moment of doing it, but it was a discipline that she had all her life. So that when the opportunity arose, it was like second nature for her. Let me take care of your camels as well. That's why I believe the miracle is when Eliezer asks, let her say that she's going to water my camels too, because that's the most ridiculous thing ever. Okay? So that would definitely be her. Okay? Again, he's looking at attributes that he can look upon that would reflect his master, right? And so, but these were attributes that were already inside of her, that she was practicing all the time, so that when the opportunity arose, it was just second nature. Let me take care of your camels as well. Rebecca was very beautiful and old enough to be married, but she was still a virgin. She went down to the spring, filled her jug, came up again. Running over to her, the servant said, please give me a little drink of water from your jug. Yes, my lord, she answered. Have a drink. She quickly lowered her jug from her shoulders and gave him a drink. When she had given him a drink, she said, I'll draw water for your camels too, until they have had enough to drink. And so she quickly emptied her jug into the watering trough and ran back to the well to draw more water for all his camels. This was a job. This isn't something that was required of her. Again, she goes and it takes a few trips. The servant watched her in silence, wondering whether or not the Lord had given him success in his mission. Then at last, when the camels had finished drinking, he took out a gold ring for her nose and 2 large gold bracelets for her wrists. Whose daughter are you? He asked, and please tell me, would your father have any room to put us up for the night? I am the daughter of Bethuel, she replied. My grandparents are Nahor and Milcah. Yes, we have plenty of straw and feed for the camels, and we have room for guests. Again, she's offering hospitality. Like immediately, don't worry, we can take you guys in. We have straw for you guys. We have a place for you guys to stay. And then this guy breaks down. That's the way I picture it. Okay? The man bowed low and worshiped the Lord. Look at how generous she is. It was second nature. Don't worry, we can take you in. We can feed your camels. We can take care of your people. Right? I don't know if you just randomly keep enough food for like 20 people in your home that you're going to be like cooking that on the spot for random people who are just going to stop by, okay? But she didn't think about the circumstance. She just looked at the opportunity to do something wonderful. Yeah, we'll take you in for the night. Don't you worry. And he breaks down and worships God. This is the answer. This is the answer. The generosity, the kindness, the love, the joy, You see where I'm going with that? When you make it a discipline in your life, it's not just a practice once in a while. Then when the opportunity arises, you flow with the Spirit and do it. It's not something... It's like the opposite of the bad impulse, right? Someone hurts you and just like, ah! It's the opposite. You have this exuding fruit of the Spirit. That opportunity arises and boom, let me exercise love and joy and peace and kindness and gentleness and, self-control. And it just becomes who you are. And this is the reason why this unfolded the way it is. Rebecca, she was prepared by God. She practiced, and it became a part of who she was. So when opportunity arose, it could only go one way. It's important to note, so like I said, Rebecca to me is a lot like Abraham, because she goes home, she brings everyone in, they prepare like the food. I was going to say feast, but it's food for everyone. And then he's just kind of sitting there, and they're all looking at him, well, aren't you going to eat? And he's like, not until I tell you what's been going on. And they're like, okay, well, tell us the story. And he says, I've been sent by Abraham to come here and search for a wife for his son Isaac. And I prayed to God that the person who would come out at the well today would water my camels as well. And this is how I would know that God has chosen this person. So he reveals all of this. And you had Laban, which is interesting to note because it's Rebekah's brother. And then his kids end up being Rachel and Leah, who later on Jacob marries. And then you have Joseph, if you follow the, the line. That's where all that comes from. So they kept within the family. So Laban ends up being very important later on. But between Laban and father, they're like, no, this has to be of God, right? And so they agree. But then you got to ask the person who's involved all this, okay? So next day comes, so they agree. They're like, this is absolutely God. Off you go. But the next day comes and they're like, well, can we hold on to our daughter for 10 days? You're going 6 weeks away. I doubt there's going to be a lot of visiting opportunities. Can we have 10 days to spend time with her? And he's like, please don't withhold me. Don't hold me back. If this is God's will, then I need to go right away. And they're like, okay, well, why don't we ask her, right? And they go to Rebecca and they ask her, and she's like, no, I'm ready to go now. Ready to let go of everything. Do you see how she's like Abraham? Ready to let go of everything and go and do what God has prepared her to do. But let me tell you again, it was an easy decision. Not that it didn't come with heartache. Not that it was like, well, I'm saying goodbye to my brother. I'm saying goodbye to my dad. I'm saying goodbye to her. This hurts, because I imagine it still hurt. But it's because she had discipline in her life, the fruit of the Spirit, the gentleness and kindness, and waiting for God to do. And so when the opportunity arose, she was ready to go. And it's just a beautiful thing indeed. So one of the big worries that Abraham had was, I don't want my son Isaac marrying one of these Canaanite women. So it's just interesting, because as Rachel becomes like a matriarchy, like a major person in the family of Israel, when you look at bloodlines and everything, just how important she is, that she had twin boys, Jacob and Esau. Okay, and hey, homework. Read that story when you go home. Read about Jacob and Esau. Okay, so it's interesting, because when Esau grows, he's firstborn, so he's supposed to receive blessing. And there was something important about being firstborn. You usually got twice the amount of inheritance as anyone else, and it was your job to take care of your family. But we know, as you read that story, that he trades it away. He comes home from hunting and he's starving, and he's like, well, what good is being firstborn if I'm dead? Sure, you give me porridge, I give you rights for that firstborn, what you're supposed to get. And then later on, when you look at Isaac is about to pass away and he's about to bless his children, it was interesting, because I was reading some other people's perspectives, and they were just like, Rebecca was deceptive. She was, and I'm like, no. She was protecting her family. She had the same heart that Abraham had, because her biggest worry was I don't want my kids marrying these Canaanite and Hittite women around us. This is what God did not want us to do, right? And so when you read their firstborn grows up and gets married, who does he marry? The people close to him. So Genesis 26:34, at the age of 40, Esau married 2 Hittite wives, Judith and the daughter of Beeri, and the daughter of Elon. But Esau's wives made life miserable for Isaac and Rebekah. The very worry that Abraham had, you can see that Rebekah was very, very much like Abraham. Was like, no, my kids shouldn't be marrying into this. She wanted to instill in them the same discipline, the same things that God had instilled on her, the same thing that as Abraham got close to God and God gave him those promises, and God just shined through Abraham, and he had those attributes that made him the reason why God picked him. In the same way, Rebekah fought for the same things, right? She wanted to pass that on to her children, that discipline, that let this be who you are, not just a rise to a moment. Okay, Genesis 28 verse 7 says, he also knew that Jacob had obeyed his parents and gone to Paddan Aram. It was now very clear to Esau that his father did not like the local Canaanite women. What gave that away? Come on. So Esau visited his uncle Ishmael, his family, and married one of the Ishmael daughters. Now you'll know Ishmael is the other son from Abraham, right? So he's going down the wrong path. So I don't think it's this big deception moment. I think she was protecting her family. I think she was trying to instill in them that discipline in doing what is right. And her son Jacob wanted to do what was right. He wasn't willing to marry who was around. And so they said, you need to go back home. You need to find a woman from our bloodline back home who God has blessed to be your wife. Okay? And so you can see that that's where it goes. And so all that, simply to ask you the question, How are you preparing? How are you preparing? If Rebecca prepared all her life, if she chased after God all her life, and she instilled upon herself the attributes of God, of good character, and made it a discipline, are you doing the same thing? It's easy to say we chase after God, and it's easy to look at one opportunity and be like, look, I did good, Lord. But it shouldn't just be like an opportunity. It should be a discipline. It should be a part of who we are every single day. And when it becomes part of who you are every single day, then it's every opportunity that comes by. Then, I love how it says, if we were to write all the stories about Jesus, we wouldn't have enough books to write it all in. We'd take a lifetime to read all the good things that Jesus had done. If you are living by the discipline, by chasing after God, that you've made it a part of who you are, opportunities come every day. Opportunities come every moment to honor and to love God, and He prepares you. He prepares you for bigger things. He takes you away from the things that you know, the things that you're comfortable with, right? It's so much easier to be like, let me just stay here. Let me marry what's local to me. Let me stay within my comfort zone, right? Yeah. Have you ever told God, this is my comfort zone, so if I had a hula hoop and dropped it, this is it, right here, Lord. I want to stay in here. And God's like, okay, so the first thing I need you to do is step out of that hula hoop. Every time you try and tell him, I'm good here, Lord, he helps you to grow. You need to grow out of that. There's opportunity everywhere, every day, and you need to be preparing yourself. You need to set time aside to be, Lord, I love you. Lord, I'm chasing after you with all of that I am. And when you say, I love you, Lord, with all your heart, all your mind, all your strength, all your soul, all of who you are, and that prepares you for what He has in store. It's a sad place indeed if you haven't been preparing, an opportunity arises, because the chance to fail, the chance to do things your way instead of God's way becomes much higher. It's a scary place to be indeed. I love that Rebecca didn't need to say goodbye to family. She didn't need 10 days. She was waiting for the opportunity for God to do His thing. She's like, I'm ready to go. She never even met the guy. She's like, I'm ready to go. If this is what God has in store for me, I'm ready to go. Will you bow your heads and pray with me? Jack, you can turn off the camera. Lord, will you prepare in us every single day to look more like you? Lord, will you help us to chase after those